Twitless, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about Spawn number 360, which is the long-awaited return of Todd McFarlane to his own property as script and plotter, though not as artist. The art is done by Brett Booth, so it's McFarlane coming back to the storytelling side, but not necessarily to the art side, which is a significant thing, especially for someone like McFarlane, who did it all with the original run on Spawn. Uh, in where we pick up at issue 360, and it says that on the cover that Hell on Earth is coming, so it's definitely meant to be a big turn in the story. And my synopsis, forgive me, audience, if I'm not entirely caught up on all the details. This is me just catching up a little bit with just the past couple issues here and some of my reading of earlier Spawn. So I may not be 100% correct on everything, but from what I've gathered, what we've got here is that things are definitely getting pretty chaotic and pretty desperate for Team Spawn, as it were. The powers of heaven and hell have been thrown into flux through these kind of like dead zones. And the dead zones, I think, are supposed to be like impervious to both heaven and hell, and this kind of evil force in the who's kind of in between both. The vampire faction, led by Blood, Blood, really original name there. But he's kind of using those dead zones to essentially, I think, cut off both heaven and hell from Earth, I think. And so angels and demons are both kind of like depowered, essentially. And so Spawn does, the long and short of it is that Spawn doesn't have his powers. We have a depowered Spawn character, and a lot of the other characters are either weakened significantly or powerless. And so the vampires are making their power play while that's happening. In the meanwhile, Spawn is left again in a very familiar situation, which is, what should he do? Should he intervene in this situation? Should he bring back the powers of both heaven and hell, who are obviously at war with each other and cause a lot of pain and suffering in Spawn's universe? Or should he leave leave the Earth cut off from those powers and then give it over to the vampires? And so he's got his he's sorting this out with his allies, and it all kind of culminates with him trying to bargain with the Blood, the vampire leader. And obviously, as many bargains with vampires go, it doesn't turn out really well. And the story ends. Spoiler alert: the story ends with Spawn, our undead character, dying. And the real significant thing that we see at the end here, for those of you who are longtime Spawn fans, is that his green power meter, the countdown on him has hit 0. It has finally hit 0000. So that's the big finale for what we've got with Spawn 360.
So my hot take on this book is why would McFarlane pitch this as his big return to the comic and not make it a jumping on point for readers? It's picking up in the middle of somebody else's arc. I don't know what kind of plotting he's been involved with. He's claiming he's doing it for this one, but clearly he's taking somebody else's plot, because this story has been going on for a while. Everything you just said, Twitless, was a mouthful. None of it was really laid out in this issue. You had to read a lot of back issues to get up to that level of knowledge of what's going on in the Spawnverse. And here we have the Todd father telling us, hey guys, go and grab my great triumphant return to comics. By the way, you need to go and read about 50 comic books to figure out what the hell is going on in this story.
Or you could do what I did and just spend half an hour on the wiki.
Wiki. That's not how you read comics.
That's how a lot of us can't keep up with comics.
Yeah.
But you do bring up an interesting point, and it's endemic to the industry, the superhero genre industry, and not just Spawn. I think Spawn could have handled it better.
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far, and a 4th book on the way. Order your books today at CurieComic.com.
Modern day, classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
But it is an issue that happens with all of the mainstays, Marvel and DC. There are some things that Marvel and DC have that are they have a couple of advantages. So because Marvel and DC have been running for so long with very recognizable characters that they've established their own, I would say, myth, in the sense that they have repeating elements that seep into pop culture. And so it's easier, it becomes kind of like a self citation style, essentially. And so if without even having to explain it, if you pop certain Wolverine references, even people who are not familiar and who've done all the back issue reading kind of know Wolverine is mysterious. He's got, a past that has all these, Weapon X connections or secret government stuff. And so you don't have to necessarily like recap as much. They have the benefit of knowing that a lot of the stuff has just seeped into pop culture. And so they can just kind of like self reference it. Spawn doesn't have that benefit. Spawn is an independent comic. Most what people know is just they know the design of him and his cape. He looks kind of like Venom with a red cape, and they might know he has some creepy chain magic power. That's about as far as Spawn, I think, has seeped into the cultural consciousness. So to your point, well read, and I do concede this, that if you are going to have a jumping on point of some kind, at bare minimum, what they should do is what they've been doing with Marvel lately, and I think sometimes with DC, but in the mainstream comics, is they'll have like a page, just one at the very beginning, that says something like the story so far. It'll have a brief paragraph that kind of just gives you enough to get into the issue. And then sometimes they'll have like cast of characters, and they'll have just like name, a snapshot of like a face of the character, and then sometimes underneath that it would say what their powers were.
Well,
And so they've been doing that with X-Men lately. And when you're trying to keep track of that cast, it's actually very helpful, because it's like, oh, here's what this character is, here's what their power is, and then there's that paragraph of the story so far. And you can do that in one page, and then you don't have to structure the entire story around it, but it gives enough for people to not just go, this is issue 360, I have no idea what I'm doing here. The return of Todd McFarlane, but it's in a story that's hundreds of issues deep. So I think that could have been handled better.
Well, even further in Todd's defense, I was an early Spawn reader when it first came out, and I remember him specifically saying that he wanted to make his version of Cerebrus, Dave Sims' long-running
Mhm.
series,
Right.
and that was a continuous storyline. So I believe, and I could be mistaken because I haven't been reading Spawn for 360 issues, but I think that the storyline has been continuous thus far, and that's the reason why he felt
Mm.
this was in keeping with the way that the books are written for him to just jump in at some point and pick up where the previous writer had left off. That being said, there was a lot of unnecessary picking up. There was a lot of characters mentioned that really didn't serve this particular issue very much. They were just referencing events that happened in previous issues, and it felt unnecessary to confuse the reader further by having them there. He could have just focused on the main characters, made it at least a halfway jumping on, a half-hearted effort for new readers to be able to jump in there and focus on the characters that were pertinent to this immediate story.
Well, now I'm starting to think I might have a hot take of my own now. I'm realizing I thought I was gonna come in with something relatively vanilla. But I think this was a jumping on point. Hear me out. The jumping on point is the art is really good. Everything looks like a really cool toy that I wanna buy, and it's everything that I was told Spawn is about. It's just, like, cool poses, really epic, verbiage and text boxes that is unnecessary, and it just looks really sick and sweet, and the colors are frankly better than what I think the '90s was pulling off. So
I
so I
Yeah.
all that to say, like, I thought you guys were gonna like this because I was like I was thinking, "Okay, my friends enjoy mainstream comics. Finally, we're getting a return to form with what mainstream comics can do that cinema and TV can't do." Novels can't pull this off. This is something only comics can do, is these, like, you're never quite sure of the sense of time because everybody's strutting with these really cool poses, and they're giving 3 paragraphs of text in the middle of a punch and all that kinda stuff. I it's just very indulgent, this comic, to me. Like, I just kinda at some point, you have to think, like, I just got the impression that McFarlane was like, "Yeah, you don't have to pay attention to these details because I'm not explaining the details, and if I don't explain them, that means they're not important to the story." What I am giving you is I hired Brett Booth to just draw something really sweet, and we're gonna give you the member berries of these characters that you know from, earlier on in the issues, and it's gonna feel continuous, but don't worry too much about the plot. You don't have to read the wiki. Just enjoy, Spawn and his sniper fatigues on a rooftop for a few pages unnecessarily. Like, I thought that was the point. So I was like, this feels like it's doing what Spawn is supposed to do. So that's my take.
Spawn is like 100% an art book, and that's one
Yeah.
brilliant thing Todd has done. He's always had really talented artists working under Brett Booth here, Greg
Mm,
Capullo before, and
yeah.
it does bring back a lot of member berries about 90s aesthetics and choices in comic books and how they
Mm.
were presented, but they also, after all this time, they start to feel really dated. And I agree that it's high quality 90s, but it's still the 90s, and the paneling felt kind of stiff and unoriginal. Plotting in particular and scripting could have picked it up a little bit. I did like some of the poses, did like some of the character designs, but it also felt generic, to be quite honest, because the character designs, there were a million characters like that in the 90s, and they're still making characters the exact same way and equally forgettable without anything really significant or poignant about the individual characters to give them some resonance in the story, which was a cheap 90s thing to do, to be quite
What
honest.
what do you mean?
So
They're so memorable. They have huge, like, tusks, like,
okay, all
strapped to
right, all right, all right.
dinosaurs.
You're killing me. And especially you, Matt, because it's like your defense is like it's like this such a you're that
I've
defense
You guys have
was
been
like
gaslighting me for 5 years that mainstream comics can be good, and I thought this was finally an example.
no, no, they are good, but like it's like it's not good because it's not good because it's bad. It was like you
Dang it.
the statement of saying these are so good because they're just poses and toys and there's nothing else behind it and you're killing my soul. So there are two things. There are two things I think that are when it comes to the art, one of the things that McFarlane did that is brilliant is not just make this an art book. Early Spawn is very like a lot of Image is very image focused, but those panel layouts are brilliant. When he conveys the movement of space and time,
Mm.
and what he's doing with verticality in some of those early issues to convey a sense of depth to like what the character is experiencing. Todd McFarlane was putting in his soul, even though his character Spawn starts off being an atheist, and this is a very non. It has religious material as its subject matter, but it's clearly done by someone who has no interest in actual religion or in believing in it. So it's an interesting approach there. But what McFarlane does with the space of the comics page and how he has the panels synergize with the themes going on, it's on another level, especially some of those early pages.
Mhm.
That's actually a little missing here because you have powerful images here, but you're not necessarily going, oh, this panel is doing something in service of the themes of the story. And McFarlane, to his credit, nailed that early on. He wasn't just making splashy images. It was like this particular panel is going to serve a role in communicating like how hellish this guy is feeling. I'm going to shape the panels to make it, to echo that. And so the paneling here and the storytelling, the visual storytelling, I say is competent, but it's not at McFarlane level. So when you said when I heard initially that McFarlane was returning, I thought I was going to be seeing the visual return. And so I'm a little disappointed to not see that. The second thing is that having characters, having superhero characters on your in your book, you have to have some connection to what they can do, almost more than who they are. But it would be very helpful to just have more name dropping or even editorial boxes to just tell me who these characters are, especially if it's supposed to be a jumping on point. You need to put that this is I think it's Lyra, the girl who with the long orange hair, who's got the bandages on her face. She's like a half angel. And
Mhm.
again, I had to just yank this information from somewhere else. You know, you got to communicate some of that to me, because one of the main things that people come to this type of fiction for is to uh, imagine what it's like to have interesting abilities. And you have to be able to convey what those abilities are or are supposed to be. Now, obviously, with Spawn here, he's been depowered, so he's not going to be functioning correctly. But some of the characters in our story still have abilities. They're still doing superpowered stuff. And so I need to know name, and I need to know what this character is supposed to be able to do. And that's a lot of what we connect with in with these superhero totems. And Spawn issue 360 did not. It just assumes that if you picked up issue 360, you've been a long time reader. So it's making that mistake of just assuming too much. When in fact, kind of what Well Red said, if they had simply followed and also connect with your earlier point, Matt C. If you are going to make toys of these characters, you have to know what that character's action figure is supposed to do. Like, I have to know that it's
Look
Magneto with his
cool.
magnet. It can't just look cool. I have to know that the action figure has to have an action
Going
figure.
in a glass case. What are you talking?
Spider-Man comes with his web shooter accessory. Like I have to know he shoots webs. I have to know that, you know,
That's fair.
what some of these people can do. Otherwise, they're just people wearing costumes. And that is something that has crept into the superhero genre as a whole. So it's not just Todd McFarlane who's at fault for this, but I think it's really on display here in this particular comic because we don't have as much familiarity with the cultural consciousness of like a more recognizable superhero character.
It's also rife with 90s storytelling cliches, though. Can I be the
It is.
first one to say that hell is really played out? Like, I'm tired of everything being
So
from
edgy.
hell.
Well,
Okay,
Red,
it's
come on.
That is so
that's Spawn.
90s.
That's just Spawn, though, dude. Like that's like you can't fault Spawn for that. It's literally
Well,
he's literally a hell Spawn. Like
and so
it's
to freshen it up, he throws in vampires. Like, are you kidding me? Like, why are these old story tropes just like all over this comic? But I think the elephant in the room is what is the significance of Spawn dying here? Do we think that this is the end of the series? Is this a new beginning? Will we see a Spawn not from hell, but
so the idea
from other
is
writing?
so this does connect with Spawn issue 1. So in Spawn issue 1, the point was that if he ever reached 0 on his power count, he was going to experience his what's called second death. And the idea whether it wasn't just like death, it was the idea that he was going to lose his soul. So I think what this actually signifies isn't just a character death, it's him losing his essence or soul, because this is the very beginning, right? He's using his powers, and then Malebolgia shows up and he says, here's your conundrum. And he says, if you do nothing and you don't use your powers, you'll just watch the world fall into further chaos. If you use your powers, the countdown will start. And the more you use your powers to try to stave off evil and chaos, the more you'll consume your final remaining lifeline on your soul. And then when it reaches 0, I'll own you. So Malebolgia is no longer in the picture, I think, at this point. So, but his soul is clearly still draining, and it's drained to 0. So I think he'll have the stakes being raised here. That countdown is significant. He's lost it. He's lost it all. This will be Spawn at his lowest moment. He will have lost his soul to something or someone. It's assuming here that it's Nyx, because I think she's the current Queen of Hell. So that would be that the Queen of Hell can now completely own Spawn and control him and get him to probably lead her forces. Because that's always been the pitch for Spawn, is that the evil demonic character wants to fully own Simmons's soul, so that he will use Spawn to then bring forth the ultimate hell on earth, which is, again, hell on earth is coming. So that stuff tracks a bit. And so I think this is basically going to be heralding, Spawn. My prediction, I think, here is that Spawn's going to be, his soul will be consumed and taken control of by the evil forces of hell to then bring hell on earth, tilt things in the balance of hell. That's, I think, the thrust of, and this is something that's been promised since like issue 1, right? So or teased since issue 1. So that's bringing Todd McFarlane back for that. I think that's kind of where that makes sense.
Well, I think we solved it. I think we actually, combined with the Wikipedia article that you read, I think you actually figured it out. That's exactly where this has to be going. Because even with the sort of storytelling that we were exposed to in this issue, we did pick up on the first half of it being about how God and the forces of heaven are severely beaten, and God doesn't know how bad he's beaten right now, and they're hiding that so that they could do some sort of real significant push from hell. And if they could put Spawn at the front of Hell's forces, that's going to be, I mean, that's clearly what they're signaling towards, I think, right? So it does have a coherent plot. It seems like maybe we just had to do some Wikipedia digging. So final thoughts, guys. Let's go with, who wants to go first? How about Twitless? What do you think?
It's hard for me to judge this because it's me jumping from the very beginning of Spawn to now, going to a sort of end game kind of scenario for the character's arc. I don't feel like I'm fully qualified to judge the story. What I can judge it on as is, for someone who picked this up in a comic book store, I do feel like I need a little bit of a map. You know what I mean? And so I think that at bare minimum, I just need those signposts that you put at the beginning of that Marvel and DC have learned to put at the beginnings of some of their comics that say, hey, if you haven't read Spawn in a while, here's some of the main characters. Here's just names, the power that they have or something. Give me a clue. Oh, she's a half angel. Okay, I guess I know enough to work with that. And then say the story so far. I need that. Without that, it's asking too much. And it's something that comic books need to stop asking people to do this much. They need to start giving us little guardrails here and there. Not a ton. They want to encourage us to go and read those back issues. So we don't want to negate the need for them, but I need something to hold on to, or else I'm just tossed in the deep end, and then it doesn't encourage you to pick up the next one. That being said, it's got strong art. For those people who like Spawn, he's still bringing the same Spawn-ness that you're used to seeing in a lot of it. I kind of like Spawn, so I'm interested, especially to see the 0000, him finally losing his soul. What's that going to look like? So I don't know. It's okay.
How about you, Elred? What do you think?
Great art, definitely the standout and colors in this issue. Very light, easy reading, cheesy. Felt like a 80s cartoon in a 90s comic book. Dialogue and characters punching each other and awkwardly kissing, and just it had all the trappings. And I would be interested to see where he takes it from here. I mean, maybe he stepped in because he's hoping to continue Spawn's next adventure when he goes to hell, and he's going to rule hell, and then he's going to fight in hell. So, okay, we're going to get a lot more hell, I guess, from Hell Spawn. And yeah, let's enjoy the ride.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.